Welcome to Sleepy Tales, a place where myths and legends are told slowly and softly to help you gently fall asleep. Before we begin, I'd love for you to share where you're from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy relaxing stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a night of our peaceful tales. Now, settle in, relax, and drift off to tonight's bedtime story. In the shadows of ancient myths, where the boundaries between life and death, light and darkness, the seen and the unseen blur, walks a goddess unlike any other. Hecate, the goddess of magic and witchcraft. Born of Titans yet independent of Olympus, she moves through forests, crossroads and moonlit lakes, guiding mortals, shaping fates, and guarding thresholds that few dare to approach. She is both protector and enigma, a force of magic, mystery, and transformation, whose influence stretches from the hidden rituals of witches to the deepest corridors of the underworld. To encounter her is to witness the unseen currents of the world, to sense the subtle power that governs change, and to realize that some knowledge, some guidance, exists only in the spaces in between. In the age before the full ascendancy of the Olympians, when the world was still young and the cosmos bore the faint traces of chaos, Hecate came into being. Her lineage was neither obscure nor humble, for she was born of Titans, Perses and Asteria, themselves figures of power and subtlety. Perses, the bringer of destruction in measured ways, and Asteria, whose name meant Starry One, who had withdrawn from the frenzy of the heavens to dwell in quiet constellations, imbued her with traits neither fully mortal nor fully divine. From them, she inherited an intimate connection to the hidden, to the spaces between action and thought, between light and darkness. She was a child of the liminal, destined from the moment of her birth to move along the edges of worlds. Even in her earliest moments, the cosmos seemed to recognize her as separate. While her peers among the gods, mortal and immortal alike, sought dominion over land, sea or sky, she gravitated to thresholds, to borders where one thing ended and another began. In her infancy, the stars themselves whispered across the night sky, a subtle chorus that acknowledged her presence. The edges of forests, the shadowed sides of mountains, the silent banks of rivers. These were the places she first visited, wandering with the quiet certainty of one who belongs neither entirely here nor entirely there. The world, vast and ordered in the ways of gods and men, felt simultaneously familiar and incomplete to her, and she moved through it as though it were a puzzle whose missing pieces she alone could perceive. Hecate's powers developed in silence. Unlike the Olympians, whose feats were often public, declared, and recorded, hers were the arts of subtlety, the manipulation of unseen forces, the weaving of destiny in threads barely perceptible, the knowledge of what lay hidden. All grew within her quietly, like roots seeking water beneath the soil. She learned to speak to shadows, to draw wisdom from the night, to hear the whispers of the air where no ears lingered. Her magic was not loud. It left no smoke or fire to mark its passage, but it bent circumstance to her will in ways so slight that even the most vigilant observers often failed to notice. Mortals might feel a sudden insight, a fleeting warning, or the inexplicable turning of events in their favour, or peril, and never suspect the hand that had guided them. Even the gods, for all their arrogance and pride, were aware of her influence only as an echo, a tremor, a presence at the periphery. It was in this quiet growth that her independence became evident. While Zeus and his siblings engaged in the overt assertion of power, Hecate did not compete. She had no need to dominate the skies or the seas. She moved in the space the others ignored, the silent corridors between action and consequence. Her autonomy was absolute. Unlike the gods of Olympus, bound by hierarchy and rivalry, Hecate answered to no council, no decree, no law of the cosmos except that which she set for herself. Even her parents, the Titans, though formidable, did not constrain her. They could only observe her wandering with the faintest smile of recognition. In Hecate, they saw what the universe had long awaited. A deity whose authority was defined not by possession, but by presence, whose realm was defined not by conquest, but by the mastery of threshold and transition. The mortal world, too, felt her before it knew her name. Travellers and wanderers sensed an uncanny attentiveness in the night. Hunters, alone in forests, might feel their path subtly guided, a way revealed where none existed. Farmers and villagers, noting strange coincidences, seeds sprouting in unusual patterns, lost livestock found in improbable places, might whisper of a protective spirit, though they knew not her form or origin. The world was shaped not just by thunderbolts and earthquakes, but by the gentle yet inexorable influence of Hecate. She moved through space as one moves through water, altering currents with quiet insistence, shaping destinies without drawing attention to herself. Yet she was not merely a benign presence. From the beginning, she was also a deity of fear, of awe, of the dark and unknowable. She was aligned with the night not merely as a companion, but as a domain over which she exercised profound influence. The stars that adorned the heavens reflected her contemplation, while the moon, ever-changing, became a mirror to her mutable will. She was both guide and sentinel, capable of illuminating paths for those worthy and leaving the unprepared to stumble into misfortune. There was a justice in her attentions, but it was not easily interpretable by the minds of mortals or the ambitions of other gods. Her morality was intertwined with balance, not with praise or adoration. Already, in these earliest centuries, the foreshadowing of her greater roles was apparent. She would come to serve as guide and protector for those on the margins of existence, those who dwelt in transitional spaces or faced unknown thresholds. Mortals would turn to her in times of birth and death, in moments of choice and peril, and they would find that she alone understood the weight of those liminal experiences. Her mastery of magic and secret knowledge, while subtle, would eventually make her indispensable to those who sought power beyond the obvious, who desired insight beyond what the eye could see. In the shadows of the Titans and the chaos of the young cosmos, she already carried the weight of wisdom, the power of unseen forces, and the enduring authority of one who stands between worlds. Hecate's singularity, her isolation, and her quiet mastery of the thresholds of existence positioned her apart from the emerging Olympians. While Zeus, Hera, and their siblings were engaged in consolidating authority over sky, earth, and sea, Hecate's domain was everywhere and nowhere, defined not by conquest, but by the subtle sway of presence. She did not announce herself. She was recognised in her absence as much as in her manifestation. A road left empty at night, a flickering light in a distant window, a sudden intuition that saved a traveller from peril. These were the whispers of Hecate in the mortal realm, and they were only the first evidence of a deity whose power would one day eclipse expectation not by force, but by mastery of that which others could not claim. Thus, in the age of Titans and before the Olympians had fully asserted their dominion, Hecate existed in quiet authority. She was a child of both destruction and illumination, a figure of independence and hidden power, whose presence was felt in the liminal spaces of the world long before her name was spoken. She moved between darkness and light, between the known and the unknown, carrying with her the subtle yet inexorable influence that would define her for all time. Already in these earliest moments, the foundations of her role in magic, in witchcraft, and in the guidance of mortals and gods alike were being laid. Even as the universe shifted around her, she remained apart, watching, learning, and preparing for the roles that would one day make her indispensable to the workings of the cosmos, the fates of mortals, and the secrets that lie beyond mortal comprehension. Hecate moved through the world in ways both seen and unseen, inhabiting the margins of existence where the ordinary and the extraordinary converged. Her presence was felt most keenly in places that humans, for all their ambition and curiosity, avoided or overlooked. Dense forests where light struggled to touch the earth. Shadowed caves that seemed to descend endlessly. The lonely meeting points of roads where travellers hesitated, and lakes whose surfaces reflected a moon that appeared larger and more knowing than elsewhere. These were not places of simple geography. They were the thresholds of reality, edges where the rules of the world bent and flexed. In these spaces, Hecate was neither intruder nor observer. She was inherent, inseparable from the liminality that defined them. Her wanderings were deliberate yet enigmatic. She moved without haste, her steps leaving no trace, her passage known only to those attuned to the subtle shifts in the air, the sudden change in shadow, the flicker of a star that seemed to pause in recognition. In the forests, she could be felt in the sway of branches, in the rustle of leaves that warned of danger or beckoned the wary onward. In caves, her presence was in the stillness, a quieting of the echoes so that those who entered could hear their own thoughts sharpen into clarity. At crossroads, she lingered in the spaces between paths, waiting for travellers to make choices that would determine their futures, guiding some silently while letting others falter to learn lessons only missteps could teach. By moonlit lakes, she appeared as a reflection in the water, though she never needed to mirror herself. Her influence was as much a part of the world as the cycles of tides and the phases of the moon. Mortals who encountered her, whether knowingly or not, felt a mixture of awe and apprehension. They might glimpse a figure in the periphery of vision, sense a presence that suggested protection or menace, or experience an intuition so precise it seemed beyond chance. Hecate's guidance was not conspicuous. It was a subtle hand upon the shoulder of fate, a whisper that arrived not in sound but in understanding. Those who sought her in secret, travellers at crossroads in the dead of night, villagers who lit candles at hidden shrines, practitioners of arts too delicate or forbidden to name, found in her a guardian who neither demanded nor judged. She offered wisdom without spectacle, counsel without command, and power without possession. In the quiet hours when the world slept or hesitated, she was a presence that shaped decisions and destiny alike, a force that reminded mortals that the universe was larger than their comprehension. There was reverence in her approach, a sense of the sacred inherent in her existence. The ancients knew of her indirectly, in rituals left in the soil, in offerings left at the boundaries of settlements, in prayers whispered into the wind. To invoke her was to acknowledge the unseen, the mysterious, the threshold beyond the ordinary. Yet alongside reverence existed fear. Her dominion over darkness, over shadows and hidden pathways, over what was unknown, carried with it the potential for punishment as well as reward. Those who approached her with hubris, ignorance or malice found themselves guided toward consequences not immediately apparent but inexorably certain. Mortals feared her because she could not be controlled, because she judged the intent behind actions rather than the acts themselves, and because she existed in the spaces humans had no authority over. Even the Olympians, for all their pride and mastery of conventional realms, Zeus over sky and lightning, Poseidon over sea and tremor, Hades over death and the underworld, did not fully comprehend Hecate's domain. They exerted authority over what was defined, measurable, and enforceable. She, in contrast, existed in the undefinable, the mutable, the spaces that defied containment. Her autonomy contrasted sharply with the structured power of the other gods. She did not answer to Zeus, nor did she participate in the councils of Olympus, nor did she align herself to serve the ambitions of those who sought dominion over earth and sky. Her power lay precisely in its independence. She could move freely across the world and the spaces between worlds, influencing outcomes, shaping destinies, and maintaining the balance of thresholds without the need for recognition or reward. Her influence extended not only to mortals, but to the subtle movements of the natural world. Trees grew in strange harmony where she lingered. Water found hidden channels through rock, and animals moved with an uncanny precision when her presence was near. These were not miracles in the sense of spectacle, but manifestations of her attunement to the currents of life, a shaping of circumstance that remained largely invisible except in retrospect. Those who lived and travelled near crossroads or wild places often spoke of an inexplicable guidance or warning, unaware that they owed it to a deity whose existence was never proclaimed in temples or sung in hymns. Hecate's movements between realms, visible and invisible, mortal and divine, were like a river carving its way through rock, imperceptible in the moment, inevitable in outcome. Her liminality was not passive, it was active, a force that maintained the balance between known and unknown, between action and consequence, between life and the mysteries that lay beyond. Mortals intuitively understood this, though rarely consciously. They recognized the pattern of her influence, the way events turned at just the right moment, how opportunities arose and dangers passed with the invisible hand of a guardian they could neither see nor name. It was in these liminal spaces that her character, fully distinct from the Olympian order, shone most clearly. While other gods sought to impose order, to claim dominion, to establish worship through monuments and spectacle, Hecate required none of these. She existed in the subtle adjustments, the quiet interventions, the moments of insight that passed as coincidence yet carried the weight of fate. Her independence, her mastery over thresholds, and her capacity to influence the world without ownership of it made her unique among the divine. Thus, Hecate's wandering through forests, caves, crossroads, and moonlit lakes was more than movement. It was the assertion of her role in the cosmos. She was the guardian of the in-between, the presence that connected worlds, the force that reminded mortals and gods alike that power did not always reside in conquest, in spectacle, or in authority. It often resided in subtlety, in patience, in knowledge of the spaces no one else inhabited. And in this quiet, pervasive influence lay her enduring significance, a deity whose dominion over thresholds and boundaries would shape the course of human and divine affairs alike, guiding those who sought her and testing those who did not, always present at the margins, always moving between worlds. As mortals began to recognize the hidden forces that govern their lives, they turned their attention to Hecate, seeking her favor and guidance in the art of magic. Unlike the gods who demanded grand temples, elaborate sacrifices, or public acknowledgement, she required only acknowledgement of the unseen and reverence for the spaces in which she moved. Her worship was intimate, secretive, and often solitary, carried out at crossroads, in shadowed groves, and on the banks of lakes that reflected the phases of the moon. These rites were not spectacles meant to impress the masses, but precise acts performed by those attuned to the subtle energies of the world. Those who understood that the true power of Hecate lay in what could not be easily seen or measured. Mortals seeking her guidance approached with offerings of simple significance: the faint scent of herbs, the lighting of candles at dusk, the careful arrangement of stones or bones at the points where paths converged. They understood that Hecate's attention could be earned through respect and intention rather than display. Those who learned to honor her in these ways found that she responded with a quiet, inexorable presence, one that could guide thoughts, illuminate hidden knowledge, and provide insight into paths that would otherwise remain obscured. Her followers came to understand that magic under her dominion was not a tool for vanity or conquest, but a means of navigating the complexities of existence, of shaping fate subtly, and of aligning the visible and invisible currents of the world. Hecate's influence over herbs and potions became a hallmark of her worship. Those who sought her guidance in the preparation of remedies and charms found that she imparted knowledge beyond the conventional. She taught mortals which herbs would calm or awaken, which roots could heal, and which could harm, and how the combination of natural elements, intention, and timing could produce effects that seemed miraculous. Potions and charms created under her subtle supervision were not mere superstition. They were manifestations of the unseen order, tools for survival, insight, and transformation. To invoke her in such practices was to acknowledge the delicate balance between creation and consequence, to respect the power inherent in every living thing, and to understand that the efficacy of magic depended as much on alignment with natural law as on the skill of the practitioner. Under the moon's pale light, Hecate's rites unfolded with both solemnity and secrecy. Crossroads, the symbolic meeting points of diverging paths, were particularly sacred to her. Mortals left tokens of devotion there, small offerings of food, trinkets, or symbols carved into the earth, acts that marked the juncture of worlds as much as roads. At these points, she could be invoked to illuminate decisions, protect travellers, or grant insight into matters hidden from ordinary perception. Her presence at such rites was often imperceptible in the moment, but its effects became clear in retrospect. A warning that prevented misfortune, an intuition that guided action, or an understanding of motives and outcomes that could not be derived through reason alone. Hecate's domain was not limited to the physical. It encompassed thought, awareness, and the unseen currents of causality that shaped life. In her role as patron of witchcraft, Hecate's complexity became evident. She was simultaneously nurturing, terrifying, and wise. She nurtured those who approached with humility and diligence, imparting skills and insights that allowed mortals to navigate dangers, protect themselves, and manipulate the forces around them with awareness and responsibility. Yet, she was terrifying to those who approached with arrogance, ignorance, or malice. Her judgment was subtle but unyielding, acting through circumstance, intuition, and the unforeseen consequences of human folly. Those who attempted to manipulate her power for selfish or destructive ends often found their efforts thwarted, misdirected, or reversed in ways that revealed the depth of her understanding. And in all her actions there was wisdom, a knowledge of timing, of alignment, of the delicate balance between the known and the unknown, that rendered her both revered and feared, a deity whose influence could not be constrained by conventional morality or simple comprehension. Mortals practicing witchcraft under her guidance learned not only techniques but also philosophy. They understood that magic was not a means of domination, but a reflection of the underlying order of the cosmos. To call upon Hecate was to recognize the interplay between life and death, light and shadow, action and consequence. Her teachings emphasized patience, attentiveness, and respect for the natural and supernatural currents that flowed through the world. Herbs were chosen not merely for their physical properties, but for their symbolic resonance. Charms were constructed with intention and mindfulness. Spells were enacted with acknowledgement of both the seen and unseen consequences. Through these practices, Hecate established a network of knowledge and influence that transcended the ordinary hierarchy of gods and mortals alike. Her presence in these secret rites was both intimate and expansive. While she engaged directly with the practitioners who sought her, her influence also extended to those unaware of her involvement. A spell cast under her guidance might avert misfortune, illuminate a truth, or transform understanding, all without visible intervention. Mortals rarely recognized her fully in these moments. They felt only the outcomes, a subtle nudge of fate, or the sudden arrival of knowledge they could not explain. And yet, in this invisibility lay the strength of her dominion. Hecate governed not through overt displays of power, but through influence that permeated reality quietly and persistently, shaping the world in alignment with thresholds, transitions, and unseen forces. Even as her followers revered her for practical guidance, they understood that Hecate was not merely a provider of power. She was a mirror of the universe itself, reflecting the dualities and complexities that defined existence. She could illuminate and obscure, nurture and punish, guide and challenge, all within the same subtle motion. Her worship demanded awareness of this complexity, a recognition that true engagement with magic required humility, insight, and a willingness to confront both the light and the darkness within the self and the world. Those who failed to perceive this depth found that magic under Hecate's influence could be unpredictable, its results as likely to instruct through misfortune as to reward through fortune. Through her connection to witchcraft, Hecate became indispensable to mortals who sought knowledge and influence beyond the ordinary. She existed in the spaces between the practical and the mystical, the natural and the supernatural, the seen and unseen. Her influence extended from the preparation of herbs to the performance of rites at sacred thresholds, from the protection of travellers to the shaping of fates through subtle guidance. In every aspect of her involvement, there was the unmistakable mark of a deity who transcended conventional boundaries, whose wisdom encompassed the known and the hidden, and whose presence reminded mortals of the intricate, often invisible forces that guided existence. Hecate's domain of witchcraft was not static. It evolved with the understanding of mortals who approached her, expanding in subtlety and reach. She embodied the eternal connection between practitioner and power, threshold and transformation, knowledge and mystery. And in this domain, she maintained her singular autonomy. She was never bound by the expectations of Olympus, never constrained by the limitations of human understanding, and never diminished by the fleeting whims of mortal belief. Her mastery over the hidden arts, her guidance of those who sought her in secrecy, and her simultaneous capacity to nurture and terrify ensured that she would remain central to the practice of magic across time, a deity whose influence touched the edges of existence and the depths of human understanding alike. Hecate's influence extended beyond the earthly and the mortal. She moved freely between the realm of the living and the domain of the dead, a presence uniquely suited to traverse thresholds that mortals and gods rarely crossed. While other deities might claim authority over specific territories, Hades over the underworld, Demeter over the harvest, Apollo over the sun, Hecate inhabited the in-between, where life touched death and the boundaries between them blurred. She was neither imprisoned by the darkness nor fully contained by the world of the living. She moved through the shadowed corridors of existence as though they were her natural home, a place where her presence was both a guide and a warning. The mortal world felt her in subtle ways, a sudden intuition, a fleeting vision of what was to come, or the inexplicable certainty that a decision carried consequences beyond immediate perception. Yet it was in the underworld that her power became more manifest, though no less subtle in execution. She was a companion to Persephone, whose journey between the surface world and the depths of Hades' realm required guidance and steadiness. Hecate's presence at Persephone's side was one of both protection and instruction, a constant tether to the realms above, while ensuring careful navigation through the perilous and unfamiliar territories below. Where the corridors of the dead twisted unpredictably, Hecate's knowledge illuminated paths invisible to others, revealing choices and dangers that would otherwise remain hidden. Her companionship with Persephone was not one of subordination or authority, but of partnership. Hecate did not control the queen of the underworld, nor did she act as an emissary of Hades. Rather, she functioned as an intermediary, a mediator between the living and the dead, the mortal and the divine, the known and the unknowable. She taught Persephone to observe, to perceive the subtle currents of power and consequence, to recognize the delicate balance required to move between worlds without disruption. Through this guidance, Hecate ensured that the cycles of life and death maintained their natural order, that mortal suffering and divine oversight remained aligned with the cosmic balance she alone fully perceived. Her autonomy within the underworld was absolute. Unlike deities who operated under the authority of Zeus or Hades, Hecate's movements and actions were unbound. She navigated the labyrinthine expanses of the dead with an independence that commanded both reverence and fear. Spirits and shades, though incapable of speech in the conventional sense, recognized her presence. Some recoiled, others were calmed. All were aware that she existed beyond ordinary judgment. Her authority was not imposed by decree, but by the intrinsic recognition of her power, the subtle shaping of consequence, and the ability to operate in realms that even gods approached with caution. To cross paths with her was to acknowledge the inevitability of transition, the duality of nurture and admonition, and the inevitability of forces beyond mortal comprehension. Hecate's role as a mediator extended not only to Persephone and mortals, but to the unseen forces of the underworld itself. She balanced the energies that moved between realms, ensuring that life and death maintained their rhythm. In her presence, the dead did not wander without guidance, nor did the living act without influence from forces they could scarcely perceive. She did not interfere with the natural order for vanity or control. She acted as a stabilizing force, a guardian of thresholds whose influence was essential to the proper functioning of both worlds. Her intervention was subtle, yet decisive, capable of preventing chaos without drawing attention to her hand. Those who dwelled in or journeyed through the underworld, spirits, shades, or mortals, recognized her presence with awe. Some feared her, sensing the breadth of knowledge and authority she carried, understanding that she could illuminate truths they were unprepared to confront, or guide them toward outcomes whose implications they did not yet grasp. Others revered her, leaving offerings at hidden corners of the living world, crafting rituals at crossroads or sacred sites in hopes of securing her favor. Both fear and reverence coexisted in these interactions, reflecting the duality of her nature. She was protector and tester, nurturer and punisher, a being whose comprehension of existence spanned boundaries far beyond the grasp of mortals. Hecate's mastery of the threshold of life and death gave her insight into human behavior and divine action alike. Mortals who approached death with ignorance and anxiety often found her presence soothing, though they could not articulate why. She illuminated paths of transition, showing when persistence was required and when surrender was necessary, guiding actions to minimize suffering and maximize understanding. In the underworld, where darkness and shadow reigned, she maintained an authority rooted not in fear of punishment alone, but in recognition of her wisdom and the inevitability of her influence. To ignore her was to risk error. To acknowledge her was to align oneself with the currents of balance that flowed through all existence. Hecate's presence was also instrumental in the broader interplay of divine politics and cosmic order. Even Olympian deities, in their assertion of power and dominance, recognized her role as a stabilizing influence at the junctures of life and death. She was not subordinate to them, nor did she seek their approval. Instead, she moved with autonomy, her actions guided by a principle that transcended rivalry, hierarchy, or ambition. Her knowledge of the unseen allowed her to act where others could not, to mediate disputes between realms, and to guide both mortals and gods in the subtleties of consequence and transition. In this capacity, she exemplified a power that was independent, subtle, and indispensable. A deity whose influence extended from mortal lives to the fundamental cycles of the universe. Even in the darkest corners of the underworld, Hecate remained a figure of paradoxical qualities. She was fearsome in her presence, capable of instilling awe through knowledge, authority, and subtle manipulation of fate. Yet she was also protective, a constant guardian for those navigating perilous thresholds. Her wisdom was profound, encompassing both the mechanics of magic and the broader principles of life and death. She demanded respect not through spectacle, but through recognition of her insight and her ability to act where others could not. The dead, the living, and even gods acknowledged her influence, understanding that she occupied a realm of power that was beyond ordinary comprehension, a space where liminality, authority, and knowledge converged. Through her association with the underworld, Hecate's enduring role as a guide and mediator was solidified. She connected worlds without being bound to either, influencing mortals and immortals alike through wisdom, subtlety, and presence. Her companionship with Persephone was a visible testament to her function as intermediary, yet it was only a fragment of her broader dominion. Everywhere thresholds existed, between life and death, light and darkness, ignorance and understanding, Hecate moved, shaping paths, offering guidance, and ensuring that transitions occurred according to a balance only she fully understood. In traversing the portal world and the underworld, Hecate exemplified the essence of liminality and power. She was a figure whose presence could be comforting or terrifying, whose guidance could save or instruct through adversity, and whose autonomy rendered her immune to the ordinary constraints of gods and mortals alike. She existed in the shadows, yet illuminated them. She walked between realms, yet defined them. She mediated the unknown, yet remained unknowable. Her dominion over thresholds, death, and the mysteries beyond marked her as one of the most singular and enduring figures in the cosmos. A deity whose relevance extended far beyond what mortals and immortals could fully comprehend. Through the centuries, Hecate's presence endured, transcending eras, civilizations, and the fluctuations of human belief. While the grandeur of temples dedicated to Olympian gods rose and fell, her worship persisted quietly, often on the margins of recognition, in places that reflected her domain: crossroads, forests, caves, and the edges of human settlements. Mortals left offerings at hidden shrines, traced symbols into soil or stone, and whispered invocations into the night air, seeking her guidance or protection. These rituals, small in scale yet profound in intent, reflected the nature of the goddess herself, subtle, pervasive, and inseparable from the liminal spaces she governed. Her cult, never imposing or uniform, adapted to each era, each community, and each seeker who approached with reverence and awareness. Through this continuity, her presence was not merely historical, it became philosophical, an enduring principle that emphasized the unseen, the transitional, and the transformative. Hecate's symbols persisted as well, carrying her influence across time. The torch, a source of illumination in darkness, represented her role as guide at thresholds, revealing paths hidden to ordinary sight. Keys, often associated with her, symbolized access to knowledge, secrets, and domains beyond reach, both literal and metaphorical. The triple form, often portrayed as 3 faces or 3 bodies, reflected her dominion over past, present, and future, as well as her capacity to inhabit multiple realities simultaneously. Mortal and divine, living and dead, visible and unseen. These symbols, repeated in art, talismans, and ritual objects, served not as mere decoration, but as enduring signifiers of her power and philosophical essence. They reminded those who beheld them that life itself is defined by thresholds and transitions, and that wisdom and authority are often found in the spaces between. Her influence also persisted in practice. Across generations, witches, mystics, and those attuned to the hidden forces of the world continued to seek her guidance. The rites and techniques developed in antiquity evolved, yet retained the essence of her teachings. Alignment with natural and supernatural forces, careful attention to timing and intent, and respect for the delicate balance that governs existence. Mortals and practitioners understood that engagement with Hecate required more than skill. It demanded insight, humility, and an acknowledgement that knowledge is inseparable from responsibility. To invoke her was not to gain power indiscriminately, but to align oneself with currents that shape reality at both subtle and profound levels. In literature, art, and the collective imagination, Hecate became a symbol of independence and autonomy. Unlike deities whose influence depended on worship, spectacle, or conquest, she maintained authority through presence, subtlety, and alignment with forces beyond ordinary comprehension. She exemplified the power of hidden knowledge, the significance of thresholds, and the strength inherent in solitude and discernment. Mortals admired and feared her, not because she wielded brute force, but because she moved freely in spaces they could neither control nor fully perceive. In her enduring symbolism, she represented the necessity of balance between life and death, action and consequence, light and shadow. She embodied the principle that understanding and influence often reside not in visibility or domination, but in subtlety, awareness, and mastery of liminal realms. Her philosophical presence extended beyond religious practice. Hecate embodied the principle that transitions define existence. Birth, death, change, and choice are all thresholds, moments in which the ordinary patterns of life shift and the unseen forces of consequence become tangible. She existed at every metaphorical crossroads, a reminder that life is navigated not only through action, but through perception, judgment, and attentiveness to the subtle guidance available at every junction. To understand Hecate was to recognize the inevitability of transformation and the necessity of vigilance and wisdom in navigating it. Her presence in these moments was both protective and instructive, offering guidance while testing comprehension, illuminating while demanding reflection. Even in contemporary times, Hecate's legacy persists. Practitioners of magic continue to invoke her, Scholars of mythology and philosophy reflect on her symbolism, and those attuned to the cycles of life and death recognize her influence in both the natural and metaphysical worlds. Her presence at crossroads, whether of roads, decisions, or moments of change, remains emblematic of her enduring relevance. Mortals who seek her find not only practical guidance, but a philosophical anchor, a principle that emphasizes the value of independence, insight, and awareness of the unseen. She teaches that the margins, the thresholds, and the spaces between are as essential as the realms they separate, and that mastery of these in-between domains provides understanding beyond what is visible or immediate. Hecate's eternal presence can be perceived as a meditation on continuity and balance. She is at once guardian and guide, illuminating paths while preserving mystery, nurturing those who approach with humility while testing the resolve of those who act with arrogance. In every age, in every culture that has acknowledged her, she has remained a figure whose dominion is subtle yet comprehensive, whose authority is unbounded yet precise, whose wisdom is simultaneously nurturing and formidable. Her presence at thresholds, both literal and metaphorical, continues to shape the world, guiding mortals through change, advising practitioners of the hidden arts, and maintaining the equilibrium between realms that might otherwise drift into chaos. Her legacy is also philosophical in nature, representing the enduring power of knowledge that is hidden, of insight that emerges through attentiveness, and of authority that resides not in display, but in understanding. Hecate exemplifies the principle that true guidance is offered quietly, that power is most profound when exercised with subtlety, and that the spaces between certainty and uncertainty, life and death, light and darkness, are the domains in which wisdom is most potent. Through her, mortals and immortals alike are reminded that transformation is constant, that thresholds are inevitable, and that the ability to navigate transitions wisely is the truest measure of comprehension and influence. Ultimately, Hecate exists beyond the limitations of time and culture. Her cult may wax and wane, her symbols may shift in form and interpretation, and the practices that invoke her may evolve, but her essence persists. She remains the eternal guardian of liminality, magic, and transformation, a deity whose presence at thresholds, both seen and unseen, ensures the continuity and balance of existence. Mortals, witches, mystics, and philosophers who encounter her, whether in ritual, reflection, or intuition, are touched by the enduring truth she embodies. That the spaces between, the moments of transition, and the knowledge of the unseen are where understanding, power, and guidance are most profound. Hecate's legacy is thus inseparable from the world itself. She is present in the shadow of the crossroads, in the flicker of a candle at midnight, in the careful selection of herbs and charms, in the moments when life and death converge, and in the choices that define destiny. She is at once ancient and eternal, hidden yet manifest, nurturing yet formidable. Through her enduring influence, she continues to teach, guide, and safeguard, ensuring that those who traverse thresholds, whether literal, spiritual, or metaphorical, do so with awareness, reverence, and respect for the subtle, pervasive, and transformative forces that define existence. In the final measure, Hecate is more than a deity of magic or the underworld. She is a principle of liminality, a constant in the shifting currents of the cosmos, and an eternal presence whose wisdom and authority endure wherever thresholds exist. To acknowledge her is to acknowledge the unseen, to respect the transitional, and to honour the transformative potential inherent in every choice, every change, and every journey between what is known and what lies beyond. Her eternal presence is the quiet certainty that at every threshold, Hecate stands watch, guiding, testing, and illuminating, a guardian of the spaces where life, death, and transformation converge.